Hi all. Well, as per my recent Canvas announcement, you are very welcome to use the SmartRack facility to get ahead on your lab works if this is something that you wanted to do. So we all know by now that on weeks 4, 5, and 6, the lab sessions will not be running, and we'll be picking up the lab sessions on week 7 after the non-teaching period. However, if you are interested in having a go at the lab exercises in your own time by yourself, you're welcome to do that. You're welcome to use the SmartRack facility as long as it's during times where there are no class running in the SmartRack rooms, okay? The lab schedule is posted in Canvas, so have a check on the lab schedule before connecting to any of the room. Make sure that there isn't any other classes from other units running, okay? So other units are not canceling their labs on weeks 4, 5, and 6. So you still have to check whether there are classes running before connecting to SmartRack, okay? So you check whether there isn't any class. You can go onto SmartRack, book yourself some kits, and have a go at finishing some of the lab handouts that I will be posting to Canvas, okay? So they will be available in Canvas even if we are not running the lab sessions. However, because the last 3 weeks were really very little time for you guys to get into the habit of properly cleaning up the devices and properly checking if the devices are clean before starting your practice, I thought that I put together this quick demo on how to check the devices and how to clean them up, okay? I recommend to my students, it is a very, it's a good habit to always clean up your devices before starting your practice, okay? At least checking them and make 100% sure that there isn't any old settings. If there are any old settings in your switches and you just go ahead and start doing your exercises, it is very likely that those old settings would get in the way of your tests and exercises and so on. So yes, if you're going to attempt to do this on your own and you're not going to have the help of an instructor to help you figure out why things are not working, or how to check if your device is clean, at least I thought it would be a good idea if everyone is 100% clear on how to clean up your devices and how to check the devices are clean. So what I've done is I booked myself a kit in ATC 328 here. I've turned on switch 3 and switch 4, and now I already connected to them, and what I'll do is I'll check whether these devices have been previously configured or whether there are all settings in it. So switch 3 has come up with this question, which is already a good sign that there wasn't a startup config on the switch. Remember, if the switch doesn't find a startup config when it's booting up, then it would ask the user whether the user wants to go into the initial configuration dialog. You always want to say no to that question, because this configuration dialog is sort of a configuration wizard where the switch will ask you step by step if you want to configure this or that, etc. You don't want to do that. You always want to say no, and then when it asks you whether you want to terminate auto install, you say yes, or just hit enter to confirm, okay? The default answer is yes. So I hit enter there, and then the fact that the switch asked me this question is a good indication that there wasn't all settings in the device when the device boot up, okay? However, that doesn't mean that the switch is 100% sure. One thing I'm going to do, just in case, I'm going to do show startup config to show you that a startup config was not present, okay? So that's why the switch came up with default running settings. However, you also have to check the show VLAN brief, use the show VLAN brief command to display the VLAN database. Remember that the VLAN settings are not saved to the running configuration file or the startup configuration file. They get saved to a different file, the VLAN.dat. And what you want to see when you do show VLAN brief, if the switch is clean in terms of VLAN configuration, what you want to see is only the default VLANs. In a Cisco switch, you will have VLAN 1 and then VLAN 1002 through to 1005, okay? Those are configured there by default. However, to be really sure, what you want to do is use the show flash command, okay? To make sure that there isn't a VLAN.dat file in there. there are certain VLAN configuration settings that will not be very evident even if you do show VLAN brief. To be 100% sure there isn't a previous VLAN configuration on your switch, you use the command show flash and then look up for the VLAN.dat file in the flash. If there isn't a VLAN.dat file, then this switch has clean VLAN settings as well. Okay, so again, show startup config not present, and then show flash, and we don't see any VLAN.dat file in the flash. Okay, so that's an indication that the switch is clean. Now that was switch 4, switch 3, switch 4 here to the right. Firstly, it hasn't come up with that question, so that is already an indication that there might be all settings in this device. Okay, even if the host name is the default one, there might still be other settings. Okay, you know, the person that configured this prior might not have changed the host name, but it did configure some other stuff. Okay, so I'm going to do show startup config, and you can see as a startup config file begins to display. So the startup config was there when the switch boot up, and those settings in the startup config have been copied across to the running settings. Okay, I would also do then show VLAN brief to check whether we have default VLAN settings, and I already can see that there is a VLAN 10 there that is not one of the default Cisco VLANs. Okay, so there is both a startup config and an existing VLAN configuration. I need to clean up this switch before I start using it for my practice, right? Again, I'm going to use the show flash, you know, to demonstrate to you guys how you would see in a switch with existing VLANs or existing VLAN configuration, you will see the VLAN.dat file there. Okay, so what I want to do is clean up this switch, and to do that I have to erase both the startup config and the VLAN database file. Okay, to erase the startup config, I'm going to use the write erase command. Okay, now I know in some of your practices you would have used the erase the startup config command. Please get into the habit of using the write erase command instead. It is, you know, it's used for the same purpose, to remove the startup config. However, it's safer. With the startup config, erase the startup config command, there is a chance that you mistype the name startup config in a way that it will remove other important files in the memory of the switch. So just to be safe, use the write erase command. You know, it is the same. It is used for the same purpose. Remove the startup config, and it's just safer to use. Okay. So write erase, the switch will ask me whether I want to confirm. I just have to hit enter to confirm, and then it tells me that the NVRAM, which is the piece of memory where the startup config is saved, has been erased. Okay. Now that's one bit. Now I do show startup config, and it will tell me, show startup config, and it will tell me that it's not present. I just removed it. Okay. Remember that doesn't take effect immediately. You need to reload the switch for the settings to be removed from the running config. Okay, so I remove the startup config, and the next thing that I have to do is delete the VLAN database as well. Okay, the VLAN.dat. I'll do that. It will ask me to confirm. I just hit enter, enter again, and then it's deleted. And if I do show flash now, I would not see there in the flash, I will not see a VLAN database file. Okay, if I do show VLAN, I will still see the VLANs, because again, the same as for erasing the startup config, erasing the VLAN.dat doesn't take any effect until you reload the switch. Okay, now I'm going to do reload, and then the switch will ask me to confirm. And now here I'm going to make a pause to let you know, sometimes the switch will ask you whether you want to save the settings. Okay, if you removed the startup config and then you made some other changes, the switch will ask you, or in certain situations, the switch will ask you whether you want to save the settings. You always want to say no. If you're cleaning up the switch, when you do the reload command, you want to say no. Otherwise, the settings will just be saved again to the startup config. So in this case, the switch didn't ask me if I wanted to save. It only asked me to confirm. I'm going to hit enter, and then the switch will start to reload. All right. So this is the procedure on how to check for an existing startup config and how to check for an existing VLAN configuration, okay? So in one of the switches, the switch was clean, so I didn't need to, clean anything, but in the other switch, I could see there were both a startup config and a previous VLAN database file, so I had to clean it up. Once this switch comes back up, I will check again whether the startup config was totally removed, and I will check again if the VLAN database was back to default, and then I can start my practice. This is something you should get into the habit of doing every time you start using your devices via SmartRack, okay? Also, please do clean up your devices by removing the startup config, and on switches removing the VLAN database as well. This is a courtesy for the next person using the devices, okay? Hopefully this demonstration was useful. Good luck trying out those lab exercises on your own. If you have any questions, you can ask them in the Q&A sessions or the discussion boards. The networking help desk will be available during the next few weeks, okay? The networking help desk is not stopping. So those sessions are running, and you can use them to ask questions if you're attempting to do your labs on your own. And also the study groups will be running over the next few weeks, okay? I'll see you then all in the next few Q&A sessions, and just, use the discussion boards or email me if you have any further questions.